My name is Marlene Rossick. I'm with the board of the Alberta Association for Gerontology. So by the look of it, we have half of the registrants in place. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to start and want to say what a sincere welcome and excitement in that welcome that we have today with this community forum. As I mentioned, I'm Marlene Rossick. I'm on the board of the AAG, and we're very pleased to sponsor this forum, Enhancing Individual Well-Being in Diverse Communities from Intention to Action for Inclusive Living. This is about people coming to your organization for services and programs, people working across our community and continuing care sector, people living in communities increasingly diverse. And we're going to be talking, as we see in the next slide, about the case for change for inclusion. So diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, belonging is an outcome. I didn't know this fact. Alberta is the third most diverse province in Canada, and we think broadly about diversity. It's about age, sex, individual preferences, race, ethnicity. Third most diverse population. Alberta's plan for healthcare restructuring from November challenges all of us to move forward in new ways to create a future in Alberta with improved care and service outcomes and empowered workforce and connected services. The next slide continues the case for change, where we look at the fact that inclusion links the concepts of diversity and person-centered practice. Inclusion for all, a sense of belonging and dignity, as well as the experience of meaningful engagement, empowerment, and equity of opportunity in any community. We did a survey in December of a number of stakeholders about what were important areas to consider for equity, diversity, and inclusion, and 3 about person-centered care and service, inclusive policies and practices, and employee development. So we welcome you, 162 registrants for today, to this circle of learning with your colleagues from across the province, because we're intentional in our work today with the learning today, and we hope that you'll continue the journey after today with the resources that'll be on our AAG website. And the final picture I want to leave with you is the next slide. Imagine inclusive living together, where we look at the beginnings of all of this and center our work on people, communities, older adults, young people, all of a diverse background, thinking about the social determinants of health and what matters for healthy living, supported by an ecosystem of all the resources that you represent here today in the communities where we come together as friends, family, neighbors, and resources to mobilize well-being with person-centered, community-focused action. That is the vision that we see for the future. And we look forward now to learning about how to put this in place. And I ask you now, Reverend Enright, to begin with the land acknowledgement.
My name is Travis Enright. I'm originally from James Smith First Nations. Originally, my family signed the treaties in Fort Carlton and Fort Pitt in 1876. In that treaty, there's a concept of being in relationship with each other and with the land. No matter where you are located in the virtual component of this moment, you are rooted in a land and you're rooted in relationship with a diverse set of ancestors, a diverse set of creatures and relationships. We like to acknowledge all the people who've come and worked and played and sweated, and from Indigenous components, the Newayuak and the Blackfoot, the Nakota Sioux, the Métis, Inuit, all those peoples that make up our province, but also all the peoples who make up the places where you reside. We also acknowledge the diverse groups who make up this land and continue to be part of the treaty. The newcomers and the ones who have been come here from a variety of different ways, the refugees and all those who make this land diverse and beautiful. So all those things, we acknowledge the good work that each of us come to this land in being part of a larger community, a larger ecosystem. So I'd like to acknowledge all those people who've come and who will continue to come in this land. And mostly I'd like to acknowledge the land itself as the biggest dialogue partner each of us have. Each of us, whether it's raining or fire or drought, we have a profound relationship with this land, this creation. So I'd like to acknowledge that as well. So thank you all for coming in, and I'd like to invite my friend Dr. Donalds to be part of this greetings and descriptions for this particular circle. So maybe Dr. Donalds, you'd like to introduce yourself a bit.
Thank you, Doc. Reverend Enright. Welcome, everyone. It is truly an honor to be here as part of this broader discussion that we will be having today and the engagement that we will have with our diverse group of speakers. I'm Director of Housing and Client Services at GEF Seniors Housing, and I think as AAG is doing this very important work of pulling community together, recognizing the diversity that exists in community, that this conversation is very timely, and it is timely across our community, right across the province, that we're having these discussions, because as we do know, as Marlene shared earlier, we are a very diverse province, and we're becoming more so. And so diversity is really and truly a fact of our existence today. And as we engage with each other and with the land to respect, to acknowledge, to share, and to uplift the differences that we have that bind us. So welcome, and thank you all for joining. Just a few housekeeping matters. There will be no live conversations during the webinar. We will have the Q&A box available. So if there are questions, please pop them in the Q&A. There will be, because we're running a very tight schedule, the presenters will not respond. However, AAG will be putting up a report of the questions and answers and feedback to them on the website as part of a report of the program. So thank you again, everyone, for coming, and I think we can get into our program now. Thank you. So as we're here today, from our various walks of life, one of the things that we know is that there's a growing expectation that the work we do reflect the diversity that exists in our society. And this is more than just having a range of faces at the table. There's also the expectation that we are being very intentional in not just inviting difference at the table, but creating spaces where those differences can be actualized, and those different voices, creating allowances and spaces for those different voices to be heard. And today's discussion is about how we're shifting this expectation of increasing recognition of diversity into action. Our speakers today come from a range of backgrounds, and they will speak about their work across many sectors, including social service, education, healthcare, and continuing care. And they will be sharing how through their work they are enhancing individual and by extension collective well-being in community, taking us from intention to action through focused efforts. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker, Sheila Hillett. Sheila is the executive director of the Edmonton Seniors Coordinating Council. She took up that mantle in 2006. In her time with the council, Sheila has encouraged collective community action that strengthens the sector and challenges systemic barriers. This work aims to build collaborative approaches to services, supports, and circumstances affecting older adults in Edmonton. Sheila has served on the Healthy Aging Alberta Community Leadership Council since its inception. Today, Sheila will share an overview of the Seniors Coordinated Outreach Program with their approach to service, including concepts of trauma-informed care and the unique work related to outcome metrics, including a reflection on what has been most significant in their journey to date. I hand you over now to Sheila.
Thank you, Shanika. For the purposes of our presentation today, I'll refer to our organization as ESCC. So next slide, please. We are an organizing body that supports a network of collaborative efforts that include mostly nonprofits providing direct services and resources to older adults in Edmonton. We work behind the scenes with multiple organizations to create opportunities for collective impact, to address issues that interfere with people's ability to thrive in their homes in community. In practice, this includes providing leadership in the use of system approaches and shared plans of action, fostering a sense of trust among partners. We support aligned activities through coordination, including establishing shared measurement practices. Central planning allows us to mobilize resources and build community engagement and will. We provide central communications and keep the information flowing internally to partners and externally to stakeholders. Next slide. Edmonton's population is becoming more and more diverse, as we've heard, and programs and services designed to address the needs of older adults can reach more people and improve quality of life by embedding equity and inclusion as foundational elements for both the organization and the people it serves. ESCC has been focusing work internally on this for a few years. This journey includes training and guided learning for our board and staff through courses, articles, books, discussions, and listening to the voices of lived experience. It also includes adapting our policies and procedures and strategic plan. Over the last several years, we've attracted and retained board and staff members who embrace diversity and are committed to working together to serve all older adults well. We still have lots to do. This internal work is ongoing and it's essential if we're going to be supporting the Edmonton senior serving sector to be more responsive to the needs of our diverse population. Next slide. As an example of how our work is connecting and supporting people in diverse communities, I want to talk about our recent work to coordinate equitable outreach services with the help of community agencies. Before our work, outreach was delivered separately by 12 organizations across Edmonton using varied service approaches, referral pathways, equity standards, data collection methods, and outcome measures. Edmonton's Family and Community Support Services asked us to undertake the work to create a coordinated model of outreach to include timely and seamless access, increased cultural responsiveness, person-centered processes, coordinated approaches, and improved services for older adults. We defined outreach collectively as a supportive service to help older adults age 55 plus connect with supports they need to improve their well-being. Outreach services can include case finding, assessment, information and referral, case management, system advocacy, and community engagement. Next slide. For the better part of a year, we worked with 26 community-based organizations who accepted the challenge of helping to create a coordinated approach for outreach. We all recognize the importance of putting a concerted effort into ensuring the most isolated and at-risk older adults were served. Establishing shared values was one of our first tasks, and these bedrock values influence what would later become overarching priorities for the program. Honoring First People, Indigenous older adults may prefer to work with organizations and professionals they trust within community. By tailoring services, we work to remove barriers and harms created by the social service system. Being anti-oppressive, working collaboratively towards dismantling oppressive systems by actively removing barriers to service. Attention to social justice, identifying and actively challenging policies and systems that harm people and look for opportunities to consistently improve systems. Being culturally responsive, actively listening to each person's unique lived experience and providing care that's considerate of their needs, perspectives, and identities. And honoring diversity, being thoughtful and intentional about providing support that takes lived experiences, strengths, emotions, and barriers into account. Next slide, please. Why a coordinated model? A coordinated model to service is invaluable because it incorporates the diversity of skills of a variety of organizations working together to build a stronger program with each of their unique knowledge, skills, and values at the table. At the same time, for the person accessing support, we've worked to create a seamless system where it feels like one program to the individual entering, and the organizations ensure seamless navigation and support for the person. To inform model design, we use task teams related to service and referral mapping, data management and evaluation, senior engagement, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. We created surveys for organizational leaders and service delivery staff to understand how outreach was being delivered. We conducted focus groups with older adults from South Asian, Indigenous, Chinese, Syrian, African, and 2S LGBTQ communities, and conducted one-on-one interviews with people who were willing to talk about their experiences in accessing services. In addition, we interviewed staff across Canada, including involved in outreach programs to older adults that are coordinated at some level. Next slide. The model that has been developed began being implemented in July of 2023 with the help of 10 partner agencies that were selected by FCSS with our support to be part of the collaborative model following an application process. ESCC provides administrative support, partnership development, strategic implementation, and shared resource management with the help of a program manager and a practice coordinator. The Canadian Mental Health Association also plays a central role related to triage and referral using the Seniors Information phone line they operate through 211. Helping older adults connect to the program through 211 can help them find an appropriate worker based on language and cultural needs, as well as proximity to where the older adult lives in the city. Soon, 211 will be able to book appointments right into worker calendars, saving additional time and navigation. Next slide. Some of the partners had outreach workers already, while others hired workers to fill the roles. In all, 21 workers are part of the model, representing 15 cultures, and about 18 languages can be accessed with their skills and knowledge. We support a community of practice for the workers and are just beginning on identifying training to help them feel well equipped to support the diverse population of older adults in our community in a thoughtful way. We've engaged an external training organization to lead the development of a competency framework that honors the skills of workers and provides opportunity to improve service through training such as providing trauma-informed care. Next slide. Fully coordinated service depends on shared data. With 10 partner agencies, we knew it would not be workable to expect them to use a separate system for entering program information. Instead, a data warehouse will be launched in spring to pull program-related portions of individual agencies' data systems to a central warehouse. Partners are collecting the same information using tools designed for the program for intake, consent, and demographics, as well as service provision. Race-based data collection will help evaluate if the program is expanding its reach to marginalized communities and meeting the needs of participants. Older adults have the options of providing as much demographic information as they're comfortable providing. For example, what cultural community or ethnicity do you identify with? Next slide, please. Tracking and analyzing data over time across the population will determine if the program is meeting its goal of providing equitable service to the diverse population of older adults. We'll be tracking barriers within service processes, and this will identify areas where internal adaptations are required or collective advocacy is needed. We hope to cover more languages within the program eventually, and collective leadership group will help to gauge program progress and identify pinch points in the partnership. Next slide, please. Over time, we hope to add more partners, whether through having outreach workers spending time at community spaces where they're needed, or by expanding the program so more workers can be brought on board to help to address participant needs in underserved communities. Looking back at data collected from July to December of last year, workers have expressed they feel more adept at getting participants connected to relevant resources in a timelier fashion because of being part of a community of practice. Not every partner can be an expert in everything, so having diversity within services and the knowledge of what those services are creates a system that can be more responsive to unique needs. Next slide, please. We have many funders to thank, as you can see, and hopefully that list will grow. Next slide, please. Finally, thank you all for listening, and should you wish to know more, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to tell you more about our program, and you can also visit our website. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I would like to now move on to introduce Kim Mansbridge and Christian Reynolds. So Kim is Regional Director for Northern Alberta at CBI with 17 years experience in the healthcare industry. Kim currently sits on the National Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Committee with CBI. One of her biggest accomplishments so far was co-hosting and launching a community of practicing reconciliation. Kimberly is passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion and wants to ensure that all team members and clients feel valued and respected. Our second speaker on this panel is Christian Reynolds, and Christian is the Regional Director for Southern Alberta at CBI with 14 years in the healthcare industry. Christian is committed to supporting a safe and equitable workforce and prioritizes creating environments where clients and employees alike feel heard and valued. Christian consistently champions the importance of empathy and inclusivity, recognizing them as fundamental elements for the well-being of both clients and the healthcare workforce. I hand you over now to Kim and Kristen.
Thank you, Shanika. We are honored to be here today to discuss a topic of significance in our dynamic healthcare landscape: diversity, equity, and inclusion. CBI Health is building key initiatives to ensure that this is the center of the work that we do.
Our presentation, Building Bridges, Cultivating an Inclusive Experience for Clients and Employees, delves into the strategic imperative of fostering an environment where diversity is celebrated, equity is championed, and inclusion is woven into the fabric of our organizational culture. In a world where collaboration is key, building bridges becomes not just a metaphorical expression, but a tangible strategy for success. We'll explore how CBI Health's DEI strategy can propel us towards a future where our workforce and client interactions are marked by understanding, respect, and a shared commitment to creating a space where everyone feels valued and heard. Let's embark on this journey together, understanding that in building bridges, we create pathways to innovation, enhance client experiences, and a workplace culture that stands as a beacon of inclusivity. Next slide. From our beginning over 45 years ago in back pain education to our role today as Canada's leading community healthcare provider, CBI Health has inspired innovation in client care. At CBI Health, better is at the heart of what we do. Next slide. We support people in achieving their health goals through engaging in their own care. Our goal is to support people feeling safe, having a meaningful quality of life, and having maximized independence in their home environment for as long as possible. Next slide.
CBI Health consistently conducts team member surveys to gather feedback from all employees. In 2020, it was revealed that there was a notable need for a more concentrated effort regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. Conducting an employee census in July 2020 provided crucial insights into our workforce, shaping the foundation of our DEI plan. In October 2020, our DEI committee was established through an open call network, ensuring representation across all segments and levels, including those with lived experiences. The committee engaged in focus groups and extensive best practice research to contribute to the development of our DEI plan. We established a partnership with Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, and over the past couple of years, the DEI committee has continued to evolve, consistently incorporating continued feedback to drive a more inclusive and equitable work environment. Next slide.
We recognize that it is imperative to translate these values into tangible actions that shape both our employee and our client experience. This is not just a strategic initiative, it's a cultural imperative. CBI's 4-point strategic focus is around recruitment and retention, growth, leadership and development, and operational excellence. When we look at recruitment and retention, it stresses the importance of listening and belonging, where we actively solicit and incorporate employee feedback, ensuring that their voices are not only acknowledged, but actively contribute to shaping the organizational culture. The growth priority emphasizes DEI in clinical practice, with a goal to integrate DEI principles, promoting a more culturally sensitive and personalized approach to healthcare. We focus on cultural awareness, gender inclusivity, navigating difficult conversations, addressing unconscious bias, and understanding power and privilege in healthcare delivery. Our Leadership and Management 101 aims to equip leaders with the skills necessary for inclusive leadership and development of training programs that encompass the organization's DEI goals. And our Operational Excellence taps into the onboarding and storytelling as a tool to convey the significance of DEI in fostering a shared understanding among our employees. Next slide.
In our commitment to elevating the experiences of both our staff and clients, we've implemented a range of initiatives. These encompass the establishment of employee resource groups and committees, and they are complemented by the provision of tools and resources aimed at supporting our diverse workforce. As we continue on our path of growth, we aim to prioritize the empowerment of our staff through learning opportunities. A significant milestone in 2023 was the launch of the Community of Practicing Reconciliation. This intentional space fosters collective growth, learning, and sharing practices vital to supporting the health of Indigenous people, actively engaging in the ongoing process of reconciliation through the learning, the history, and present circumstances of Indigenous people. It serves as a platform for practicing in the crucial decolonization of healthcare practices to provide opportunities to align with practice standards regarding Indigenous cultural humility and anti-racism. To further enhance our client experience, we are developing a person-centered tool called Life Through My Eyes. This tool will be designed to deliver respectful, compassionate, culturally safe, and responsive care. It aims to meet the diverse needs, values, beliefs, and preferences of clients, their families, and others identified as significant in their lives. In tandem with these initiatives, CBI remains committed to upholding policies for a respectful workplace. We actively communicate our values and emphasize the integration of DEI within our organization. This intentional focus not only positively impacts our staff by fostering a richer workplace culture and heightened awareness, but also contributes significantly to enhancing the client experience through the ripple effect of a more inclusive and informed team. Next slide.
The Client Family Advisory Council, or CFAC, as we call it at CBI, is a crucial element of our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion within our organization. The primary goal of this committee is to bring forth the invaluable perspectives of the client and their families into the heart of the decision-making process. By actively involving clients and their families, we aim to enhance and refine our programs, pathways, and approaches, ensuring they are not only effective, but also sensitive to the diverse needs and experiences within our community. Integrating the Client and Family Advisory Council into our DEI strategy is a key initiative. Diversity encompasses not only the demographics of our workforce, but also the varied experiences, challenges, and aspirations of our clients and their families. This council serves as a direct link to understanding and addressing those diverse experiences, creating an inclusive environment where every voice is not only heard, but actively contributes to shaping the direction of our organization. This initiative aligns with our broader DEI strategy, emphasizing the importance of active listening, empathy, and a commitment to acknowledging and addressing the individual needs and values of our diverse community. In essence, the CFAC is a powerful tool in our pursuit of creating an inclusive, client-focused culture that goes beyond mere representation and actively integrates diverse perspectives into our decision-making process. Next slide.
In evaluating the impact of our initiative, let's review a specific training module that was introduced in 2023 named A Walk in the Park. This was designed to elevate awareness and address unconscious biases within our team. Its core objective is to nurture a workplace culture grounded in the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusivity.
Next slide, Greg. Thank you.
The training plays a pivotal role in empowering our staff to acknowledge and understand their biases, fostering enhanced teamwork, and importantly, it ensures that our clients receive care that's not only compassionate, but also culturally safe, aligning seamlessly with our commitment to making a meaningful difference in people's lives every day. The training unfolds as a visual exercise, inviting participants to close their eyes and immerse themselves in an audio experience, guiding them through a virtual walk in the park. Following this, there's a series of photos representing diverse individuals and groups from various backgrounds that are shared. Throughout the experience, we ensure to create a psychologically safe environment, fostering thought-provoking conversations that enables participants to openly share their experiences. Participants expressed how their life experiences shaped their perceptions of the stimulated park. Some participants openly shared feelings of guilt and shame, narrating instances where unconscious biases impacted their interactions in the past. The overall feedback regarding the training has been positive, with staff expressing that this will aid in recognizing and addressing biases moving forward. They anticipate that this newfound awareness will positively influence their interactions and care provision for clients in the future. Next slide. As we conclude our exploration of DEI strategies and the pivotal theme of building bridges, cultivating an inclusive experience for clients and employees, it's evident that a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion extends beyond rhetoric. It's embedded in the very essence of our organizational culture. We've embarked on a journey that prioritizes the circle of learning and sharing, recognizing that the power of diverse perspective contributes to our collective growth. Education stands as a cornerstone as we continuously strive to raise awareness, foster cultural competence, and engage in difficult yet necessary conversations. Our dedication to creating safe spaces for both clients and employees reflects our belief that everyone deserves an environment where they feel seen, heard, and valued. The establishment of committees such as the CFAC and Community of Practice underscores our commitment to collaborate decision-making by actively seeking the input of those we serve. We ensure that our strategies are rooted in real experiences, thus making our organization more responsive and attuned to diverse needs. Looking forward, our path involves enhancing team development by immersing these principles of DEI in our teams. We aim to create a culture where each member feels a sense of belonging and purpose. We continue to work passionately to implement these strategies, building bridges that span not only across our organization, but throughout the diverse landscape of the communities we serve. Next slide. That concludes our presentation on CBI's continued commitment to creating a client and employee-focused DEI strategy. We recognize that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And though we are just at the beginning of this work, we are committed to continuing to learn and grow our knowledge in this crucial area. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim and Kirsten. That was very insightful. I'll now like to introduce Kathy Tam, who is our next speaker. Kathy brings extensive experience in healthcare leadership, continuing care, and geriatric rehabilitation medicine to her role as Chief Executive Officer at the Winkai Care Center. Kathy also facilitates an interdisciplinary team and healthcare professional course as adjunct assistant professor at the University of Alberta. Throughout her career, Kathy has witnessed the connections between happiness and culturally responsive care, recognizing that cultural humility is fundamental to interactions between and amongst staff, residents, and families. With the support of an Alberta Health grant, Kathy's team is developing an interactive learning experience to increase the comfort of point of care staff in engaging in culturally responsive palliative and end of life conversations with residents, families, and each other. Over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Shanaka. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. Next slide, please. Next slide. There you go. It's my honor to be in a room full of colleagues who are dedicated to continually evolving this sector of continuing care, a sector that is fraught with public misperceptions and systemic and structural challenges. It is also a sector powered by teams who keep showing up to work and offering what they can do to bring ease and well-being to residents and each other. We know that our centers will be the last home residents will experience. And we also believe, with the fullness of our heart and guided by our professional practice and collective experience, that a residence is alive, thriving, even until their last breath. Our cultural identities are shaped by what we believe to be important and how they inform our decisions. Winkai Care Centers was born from an immense desire our founders held dear to provide culturally responsive care to seniors. Without a doubt, culturally responsive care is vital. We know that because demand for our programs and service continues to grow. Since opening 2 decades ago, we have grown to serving 320 residents in our supportive living, long-term care centers, offering adult day support program to 64 clients. And just past 4, we broke ground for a purpose-built home for 180 residents. Sometimes our work in continuing care can be tough, and we don't always immediately see the hope and connections. Let me share a short video with you now that will remind you of a sacred work and underscore the meaningfulness of culturally responsive care. In the video, you will meet Cynthia Ma, a young resident who came to Winkai after experiencing a stroke. Cynthia was determined to be discharged to her family home. It seems impossible at first, as we were running up against so many challenges, especially the time and the resources to support her in achieving her goal. I'm so proud of our team who worked together and became very creative in offering Cynthia what she needs. So please enjoy the video.
我叫安生媽，叫 Cynthia。我係21年11月咧，突然間中風入咗醫院。響12月咧，就因為醫院冇床位，佢要我出去睇下揾邊間療養院住啊，或者係 care centre 住。
I was a little worried when my mom got sick. I was worried about a lot of things, but I think the biggest thing was definitely her mental health. When my mom was sick, she kind of stopped talking to a lot of people. She was less emotionally available. And I think that Wayne K really helped with her mental health.
而家有啲院友好好笑啦，有時啲嘢就係、佢哋有時可能啲英文唔係講得咁咩，佢就係咁意叫啦，叫有一個 staff Maria 叫做媽咪咁啊，我又好講得笑嘅，冇乜所謂嘅，我又跟住人哋叫啫嘛，佢哋唔介意我又照講噶啦。有時好多時我都同佢哋講下笑啊咁咯。啲 staff 有時都好講得笑嘅，冇乜所謂嘅。
There's multiple, I think, reasons in why my mom is, able to come out of Wayne K as a successful rehab person. Other than my perspective, I guess. Like, I'm sure my mom has many, but I'd especially like to thank Caitlin. She's done an amazing job in, with the whole PT recovery. She's organized trips throughout the city. She's organized, a program for my mom to do at RB, which is a rehabilitation program.
佢哋同我喐下啲手腳啊，同埋如果我喺 RB 嗰度人哋教咗啲乜嘢俾我，我就講俾佢哋聽，佢哋就再同我 practice 多幾次咯。
She went to RB many times in the past, and me and my dad have both seen, great results when it came to, that kind of PT rehab.
咁而家可以行得幾步，所以我就想翻屋企住咯，始終有啲家庭嘅樂趣喺度咯。我準備今個月9月份19號我就翻屋企住啦。
There's many reasons why I think my mom has been, her journey has been a success story. For example, there's been amazing staff members from the PT staff to just the nursing staff to just the regular caretakers. They've all been amazing. They've all treated my mom super well. They were always really supportive of my mom. They always love to make jokes with my mom, and they've just done an exceptional job of caretaking.
多謝晒啲人啊，好開心啊！
Thank you. We know that one of the reasons for Cynthia's experience. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. We know that one of the reasons for Cynthia's experience and outcome came from being an environment that promotes culturally humility and cultural responsiveness. We are purposefully using these terms, cultural humility and cultural responsiveness, which are deeper and more continuous than phrases such as cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, and cultural competence. Cultural humility is about asking curious questions to gain a better understanding of what is culturally important to residents. It recognizes that culture is consistently evolving and how a person express their culture is unique. We know through our experience that people within the same immediate family express their shared culture in different ways. And cultural responsiveness is about attending to residents and their families or caregivers based on what they share and by actively leaving our own assumptions and biases aside. Later this month, we will begin a 3-month pilot of an interactive educational experience developed through a provincial palliative care grant, informed through discussion with staff, families, and caregivers, and guided by an expert advisory committee to strengthen the confidence of frontline staff to engage in culturally responsive conversations about palliative and end-of-life care with residents, their families and caregivers, and each other. We will use feedback we received through the pilot to update and refine the toolkit to ensure the content is meaningful and that the activities lead practical and immediate application in care homes across the province. Our intent is to have final educational experience ready for distribution by the end of the year. Please contact Jane C. She's the lead for this project if you'd like to receive the toolkit when it is complete. Thank you for your time and attention today. I have tremendous faith for our sector, knowing that we are working so hard to create fulfilling residents' experience and equally fulfilling workplace. In closing, I'd like to share with you the quote about compassion from Henny Newman. So next slide, please. So compassion, it is not bending toward the underprivileged from a privileged position. It is not reaching out from high to those who are less fortunate below. It is not a gesture of sympathy or pity for those who fail to make it in the upward pull. On the contrary, compassion means going directly to those people and places where suffering is most acute and building a home there. Henny Newman, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathy. We continue to move on. Our next speaker is Jennifer Ma. Jennifer is the Dean of the Faculty of Health Studies at Northwest College. She has over 25 years of experience in leadership and education. She focuses on creating an environment that cultivates excellence and innovation by valuing people and enabling them to make a difference in health and the community. She led the Practical Nurse program through tremendous growth and implemented changes that had significant impact on student success. In 2023, Jennifer received the 100 Most Influential Filipino Women in the World Award. Jennifer is an idea person and a driving force for innovation. Jennifer is a registered nurse with a master's degree in nursing, a certificate in leadership, advanced training in intensive care, and has been accepted into doctoral studies. Jennifer uses the pronouns she, her, and is passionate about equity, diversity, and inclusion, and anti-racism. I welcome you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Alberta Association in Gerontology for providing this venue. The speakers have been tremendous, and as I've been listening, I've been learning myself. So thank you so much. My spot here is really to talk about preparing employees for culturally sensitive practice and community integration. So from an educational point of view, And it was great to hear Kathy Tan and all of the great work that's been happening in the practice setting. And I think it really set my presentation up well because it really showed the purpose and the partnership that education and practice needs to have to make a transformation in our health system. So today I'll be really focusing on the experience and perspectives in education. And I hope to demonstrate this through the instruction that we use to help to grow new graduates. In my presentation, I'll go through a snapshot of the current landscape, educational outcomes, the foundation to achieve these outcomes, an example of one of the projects that we did to build culturally sensitive practice, and then looking at community integration. And so let's go to the next slide and look at the current landscape. And I know that Marlene set us up well, talking about the diversity in our province and that Alberta is the third most diverse province. So this just really highlights that fact. The Canadian census indicated that there are 450 ethnic and cultural origins within Canada, 200 places of birth, and 100 religions, 450 languages. I think that that's huge statistics and really does show the diversity. The numbers of international students in Canada grew by at least 30%. And then this slide shows some statistics specific to Norquest. So what you'll see here is our Norquest by the numbers that shows that, oh, I have to look at my eyes here are a little, I have to get closer here. So we have primarily females in our institutions. There are 102 countries of birth, 77 first languages spoken, and over 2,000 international students. So we have a diverse culture that is within the educational institution. Next slide, please. So the current environment in health, as we know, there is health shortages, there's some retention and burnout, and the complexity of the clients and as well the health professionals is diverse and complicated. And even our health professionals are managing different aspects within their lives, whether they're taking care of their loved ones or children, they also come with those complexities. Next slide, please. So student outcomes, what do we focus on in education? So of course, we're focused on the professional aspects, so the technical skills and knowledge that are required in a profession such as nursing or healthcare aid, whatever that may be. And the other aspect that we focus on is what we might call as power skills, or what you might know as soft skills. So things like resilience, otherwise known as grit and empathy. When I did a quick scan of what the 12 most dominant skills that employers are looking at, they are resilience, empathy, flexibility, active listening, teamwork, clear communication, attention to detail, patience, time management, dedication, self-awareness, and leadership. And grit is one of the top pieces. So grit is a theory that was outlined by Angela Duckworth. And in that, she identifies grit as 5 characteristics: perseverance, resilience, courage, passion, and conscientiousness. And that resilience is one that we hear a lot about, and our ability to work through issues and to be able to mitigate problems. So how do you develop grit? Well, the items that are required are really finding passion and practicing skills and then contributing to a greater purpose, giving yourself time, and immersing yourself in gritty culture. So as an educational institution, what can we do to really help with that? Well, we can help students find their passion and get them into the right programs. And then we can help them practice. And then really, I think that the place that we can really contribute is really what the greater purpose is, what they do to contribute. And in this case, in healthcare. Next slide, please. So we embarked on a journey, and I thought I'd talk about one of the examples that we've done. So we had a project called Bloom, and Bloom stands for Be Anti-Racist, Lift Up BIPOC Voices, Optimize Opportunities, and Manifest Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So this was an initiative to look at the program through a BIPOC lens, so through Black, Indigenous, and people of color lens, to provide an environment where all students can succeed. It was focused on equity, not equality. So recognizing also our own humanity and having that we do have biases and that we'll never get rid of all biases, but that we can highlight them and work with our biases. So if you recall, it was a picture that was on the internet often with 3 people and they're standing on boxes, and the sizes of the boxes differ depending on the height of the person. And what it suggested is that we have different sides of the boxes to be able to see over a fence that's there. And in some iterations, what they do is they remove the fence, and that represented removing barriers. So that was the focus of our project, was to really remove those barriers and ensure that students were all able to meet the outcomes. So we recognize that students don't start at the same place, but we want to help to get them to that place. So this project engaged students and staff, and we looked at what the barriers were and how we would mitigate those barriers. So we engaged specific sessions where we could speak to BIPOC people so that they would have a safe place to be able to share, and we could learn about what we needed to do. And why is this really important? Well, I think that when we value people and they have a sense of belonging and dignity, and we focus on quality of life, that they also in turn bring that into their practice. So as an educational institution, we're focused on ensuring that we have that kind of environment for our students and our staff, and in turn that then they integrate that into their practice. So the process that we used is similar to any process that good practice and process for a project. And so we engaged stakeholders. Like I said, there were many BIPOC people that were engaged. We included people with specific competencies and experience in equity, diversity, and inclusion, and also educational learning practices. And so a working group was struck, as well as the steering committee, to be able to guide this process. We focused on one particular high stakes assessment that students were identifying as a pain point and a source of barrier for them to be able to learn because of the high stress related to it. And so the team took the information and made sure that the assessment process included equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we created a simulated environment that helped students to learn and improve the outcomes, so that they weren't fearful and that wasn't the barrier to learning. And so most of the feedback that we had gotten previously were from BIPOC students, and that this was a barrier for their learning. After the project was implemented, the feedback that we got from them was that this was a safe learning environment, that they could get feedback from, and they could integrate it into our practice. Now, the complaints that we got after the project was implemented had decreased significantly, and students felt that they were more prepared for their clinical environment. In some instances, people are worried that by looking at equity, diversity, and inclusion, that we change the outcomes. And I just want to make sure that everyone knows that the outcomes are still the same. It's not about changing the outcomes, it's about changing the process to be able to get to the outcomes. Next slide, please. So creating an environment for people to flourish. That was really the focus of Bloom. And we really wanted to think big, start small, and really learn fast. So it was about the journey and not the destination. And as we go through, we know that we'll be learning all of the time and looking at our quality control processes and integrating the learning that we gather along the way. So the key takeaways from that journey were just realizing that there is no perfect environment and that there will be progress, setbacks, and a lot of emotion. So working in this kind of space is a bit gritty in itself and emotionally taxing for people. And that was one of the learning that we had, and that we needed to have time to be able to work through the mental and emotional journey, and that it's important to just really just start and keep going, but have that time. That EDI and anti-racism is embedded in the strategic plan. And so that is important to ensure that everyone is focused on moving forward. So I'm very proud to say that Norquest College has that embedded in the plan as well as in the educational focus. So in our what we call reimagine higher education. And that we build a culture of competence, and this takes time and practice. And I think it's also important to have representation. So representation in terms of expertise in equity, diversity, and inclusion, but also in lived experience. And that in itself helps us to propel the movement, I guess, faster, and that there's a different depth of understanding and learning there. Next slide, please. So some of the other initiatives that we have are BIPOC mentoring. We have an anti-racism toolkit that helps instructors and students to be able to learn. We've embedded equity, diversity, and inclusion scenarios in simulation. I've talked about representation and the lived experience, and then embedding power skills into the curriculum and into the learning outcomes, and building curiosity. So I think that that was mentioned in a previous presentation, that we approach things with curiosity and understanding and helping people to get to the point where they can help someone else. So it won't be the same practice as we may be used to, but really trying to find out what it is that what our clients and students need in order to be able to learn and integrate equity, diversity, and inclusion, into our practice. And then self-care. I think that self-care is an important aspect as we work through equity, diversity, and inclusion, and modeling and recognizing humanity. Next slide, please. So as I leave you, I just wanted to leave you with a quote, and that is just tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. And I think that that is pivotal as we look at education and including equity, diversity, and inclusion in the learning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We're now at our last speaker for this segment of the webinar, and I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Catherine Chubbs. Catherine is an Indigenous leader with nearly 32 years of experience in healthcare. Dr. Chubbs is a president and chief executive officer for the Good Samaritan Society and has held senior leader roles in 2 provinces for over 2 decades. A researcher, she has faculty appointments with Memorial University in Newfoundland and the University of Lethbridge. Dr. Chubbs has completed numerous health degrees, is a certified health executive, and holds an executive doctoral degree in business administration. She is the recipient of numerous awards, including the CCHL 2023 Human Spirit Award and the CCHL 2022 Muhammad Ali Abed Memorial Service Award in recognition of her leadership, passion, and dedication to addressing racism and for many community service and for her many community service endeavors. Over to you, Dr. Chubbs.
Yeah. So I won't repeat the land acknowledgement, but just to say thank you to Reverend Travis for sharing the land acknowledgement. Slide, please. So I'll just start off talking a little bit about me. Often how we start in our culture in terms of storytelling. So a little bit about me. I'll talk a bit about reconciliation in healthcare, in particular the continuing care sector, why it's important. Next slide. So a bit about me. I come from a very remote community of about 50 people in northern Labrador. We had no roads when I was growing up. I went to school in a rowboat, lugged water from the brook. We had 2 homes. We had a summer home and a winter home. And so we were very nomadic. We spent 6 months of the year in one home. And then my family, my parents who had 6 children, moved all of us and their home twice a year in boat. And so moved back and forth. The winter home was very forested. And that's where we spent our, from the fall until the spring. And then the summer was on the outpost. And that's where we spent our summer seasons. We very much lived off the land. Where I grew up, we had to leave home when we were in grade 9 to go to school if we chose to, or if our parents made us. So that's kind of a little bit about me and where I come from. Next slide, please, is just a bit about my family now. So my parents, who you'll see here in the boat, are still living well and experiencing the joys of what it's like to be a remote Canadian, an Indigenous remote Canadian living in faraway land, I guess, from healthcare services. My husband is Inuit, and so he, along with my First Nations background, myself, we have 2 children who get the joy of experiencing the First Nations and Inuit cultures. So we work hard, despite being away from our ancestral homes and lands, from our traditional lands. We work hard to try and embed that in our life. And you can see me here, I think, with my last trip home last winter, rabbit catching with my dad. On to the next slide, which is a bit about Good Samaritan. Sorry, my screen's freezing here. The namesake of our organization comes from a story that Jesus told as captured in the Christian scripture. It was a story of a man attacked, beaten, and left for dead. It was a story of this man being overlooked by people with means and power, but one where this pain was interrupted by unsuspecting others, one that crossed cultural barriers to bring the care and healing needed. So picture with me the vulnerable, those who have been beaten down by the unsuspected nature of life's curveballs and the inevitable pains of the journey in this world. And it's through the lens of the Good Samaritan that we are on this journey of reconciliation. Next slide, please. So Good Samaritan, our mission is to extend Christian hospitality through continuing care to those most in need. Our vision is to grow in strength, excellence, and creativity. And our values is healthy relationships, hospitable environments, and servant leadership. We are about 4,500 employees strong. We serve over 6,000 residents and individuals every day at 61 sites across Alberta and British Columbia. We have 2 community choice programs, which is services, comprehensive care for services for people, for the elderly. And we also have some outpatient services as well. Next slide, please. The photo here you'll see on the bottom is at one of our Indigenous people celebrations. Next slide, please. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada was created through a legal settlement between residential school survivors, the Assembly of First Nations, Inuit representatives, and the parties responsible for creation and operation of residential schools, as well as the federal government and church bodies. The Canadian government set up the TRC in 2008 to inform all Canadians about what happened in residential schools. It documented the truth of survivors, their families, communities, and anyone personally affected by the residential school experience. It reveals the long and painful history behind Canada's treatment of Indigenous peoples. There was 94 calls to action in total, and several of those relate to health. So that's really what we've focused on, but across all the recommendation subsets, Good Samaritan is looking at different ways that we can have an impact. Next slide, please. Most provinces has formally adopted or made a commitment to the TRC, and within those provinces, so have many healthcare organizations like us. And why are they taking this stance? It really isn't about following the trend. It isn't about acknowledging the past only, addressing the issues that are facing us today. Next slide, please. Just a few highlights of why this is so important. Indigenous people experience significantly worse health outcomes than non-Indigenous people. The difference in life expectancy alone is staggering. And you'll see on your slide here some data. Next slide, please. Likewise, suicide rates 2 to 3 times higher than non-Indigenous people, 5 to 6 times higher for youth. And in some fairly recent data, it showed that Inuit youth in particular is 11 times higher. Along with suicide certainly is the mental health issues and drug abuse. And so the opioid crisis disproportionately affects Indigenous people, due to a legacy of colonialism, racism, intergeneration trauma, and so on. So there's a lot of reasons why today this is a crisis across the board, and we really need to address it. So how do we address it? What is the solution? And we believe we can start with reconciliation. So the key elements of a reconciliation strategy, and because our time is short, I'll just provide the highlights, but a visible statement that shows your organization is on the path, that commitment. You need to have a strategy. You have to have measurable targets. You can start small, pick low hanging fruit, and build over time. Partnerships, develop and strengthen partnerships with Indigenous communities and people. Co-design, develop, and plan together. Nothing about them without them. Investment, you have to invest or reallocate resources for this, just like everything else. A small investment does go a long way, but it does require resources to address reconciliation. The human resources front is a huge, a huge basket of things that we can do. Racism is still very, very real in our workplaces. And we know that we need to enhance the knowledge of truth and reconciliation. So cultural competency training is often phase 1 of a reconciliation approach. You need to count your employees. You need to set targets. You need to see representation in the workforce of those you serve. So increase the recruitment and retention of Indigenous employees and volunteers. I personally always say that minimally our workforce should be a representative sample of our population. So some parts of Alberta, 11% of our population is Indigenous, then we should be looking for that as a minimal target. We should create a flexible Indigenous recruitment strategy that helps overcome barriers for Indigenous people entering the healthcare field. We need to be deliberate with advancing Indigenous employees, as they're very poorly represented in leadership roles in healthcare. Again, count the employees, set targets, be deliberate. We need to incorporate culturally safe and relevant Indigenous practices into our human resources and programs, not just in our care programs. And we should look to partner with communities and schools on engineering healthcare careers for Indigenous people. I myself actually came through an Indigenous healthcare strategy from government, where they were trying to put people, Indigenous people, creating, bridges for people to get into nursing. Foster wise practices. So collaborating with, slide. Sorry, just 1 second. Collaborating with relevant entities to identify and close gaps in programs and services for Indigenous people. Improving access to spiritual supports for Indigenous patients and their families. I need to develop a framework for integration of Indigenous cultural and healing practices. So it can't just be an add-on, it needs to be embedded. And healthcare system navigation is something that we're currently looking at. It's notoriously difficult for Indigenous patients for a host of reasons. So make sure you're looking towards that in your organization. We need to create safe spaces. There needs to be a visible commitment, as I mentioned earlier, but also things in the environment that makes Indigenous clients feel safe. And finally, communications. So develop a communications plan and process to regularly and clearly interact with Indigenous communities and their peoples. Seek more inclusion of Indigenous voices within the organization, and develop guidelines to direct collection and sharing of data, and making sure you're protecting that information. Next slide, please. So you'll see on your screen Good Samaritan Statement of Reconciliation, and this was a big step for us. So in late 2020, so I started in 2020, late that year, our board and leadership did a lot of deliberation, and we made a determination that reconciliation would become a strategic priority for the organization, not just be something we celebrated a couple days a year. So we developed this very thoughtful approach to reconciliation and developed a commitment statement that's posted in all of our homes across the organization. We had several other things. Next slide, please. Just want to touch quickly before I finish up, touch quickly on some things we're doing here at Good Samaritan. So we started after our strategic identification of it as a strategic priority, we developed a portfolio. So named a director to be responsible for reconciliation, and we'll soon actually be adding a VP with that responsibility. We've also created an Indigenous advisory role to support continued execution of our strategy. We were very conscientious and deliberately celebrating Indigenous culture, so making sure that we're providing support and resources to all of our homes and our employees to be a part of celebrations such as Indigenous Peoples Day, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, and so on. We work hard to hear and honor the truth, so speaking to elders, speaking to our residents, and that sort of thing. We created a reconciliation fund, so we are a charity, and we do have different funds for fund development. So we created a dedicated reconciliation fund that people can give to and do give to on a regular basis, including through employee donations through payroll. The biggest thing we've undertaken is our own Good Samaritan Cultural Competency Program. So with lots of effort and engagement, we created a cultural competency curriculum, and we implemented that in September. It's voluntary, but we want everyone to do it, obviously. But voluntary formally, it's an hour-long program, and 60% of our employees have completed it already. So we're very, very pleased. We've created an equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy, and within that, reconciliation stands out as a key pillar. And so, putting it in multiple places within the organization to make sure it gets focused where it's needed. And then the next slide, one of the key success things we've had is to create an Indigenous internal advisory group. So we have a cohort of our Indigenous employees that advise us on everything and anything that we do in relation to reconciliation and moving our strategy forward. We work very hard on relationship building. So with many nations, individuals, elders, and so on across the province, on I would say almost daily basis for myself, working with them to understand how Good Samaritan can help support their needs. What is it that they're needing for their nations? It could be as simple as helping with a grant application. It could be as complex as working to develop brand new long-term care. So working with them to show support, to offer support, and just to work in partnership and friendship with them. A couple of other smaller things, looking at our procurement processes, which is not in the health recommendations, but certainly comes out of the TRC. So putting in a key component within all of our RFPs that gives points, if you will, for how the vendors or the proponents are looking at addressing reconciliation. And then we have a lot of other strategic pieces that comes through our strategic plan, and we're starting a new strategic plan here in April. And we're seeing more and more weaving of our EDIR, we call it Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Reconciliation approaches in our strategic plan. So we're very excited about what the future holds for us there. So that's a bit about our reconciliation journey, and I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, but I'm thinking I'm pretty close, so I will stop there. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and excited to see this work underway.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I think we've packed quite a bit in our hour and 20 minutes so far, and I have now the wonderful honor of trying to capture the themes out of the discussion. And I think it's real important. I think there's a thread that's moving through here that speaks to that us in our various spheres, ensuring that we're shifting from intention to action takes work. It takes very deliberate work. It takes work on ourselves with our staff. It takes work with our organizations, and as Sheila pointed out, with our partners, to have different people at the table listening to the voices that we're working with. It also, in taking work, it is also about us creating those spaces to allow for this work to take place, to these very safe spaces where we can get the multiple perspectives and we can begin to shift us into action. When we look at, or I think it was Kristen or Kim who said, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I like that Catherine added reconciliation to it. It's not a marathon. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And I think Kathy talked about that it's a journey. And so as we are having these conversations, we need to be very thoughtful in the work that we do. We need to continue to be open to learning from or different groups that we're interacting with, and to work towards thoughtful action, and to really invest in connecting with each other so we can move towards these thoughtful actions. I'm going to hand you over now to Reverend Enright to take us into the next part of our program.
Wow, this has been an amazing afternoon of really understanding the complex nature of being inclusive. There was a moment when I was thinking that we've moved almost from a simple road, where a road would go in the old Roman ways, that a road built everything. You take the road in and you follow the rules and everything. But now it seems, with all the diversity and the complexity around that, it's almost like the road has been turned into like a river. And we got to find ways in which we navigate that river in a good way. And there's so many people that need to get on that river that was sometimes we may not always know where that inclusion is taking us. But it's the courage of the journey that I really appreciated in most of the conversation, all the conversations that we've had today, that there's a need to be courageous in this time of seeing other not as something to be seen as different, but an opportunity to see as a new friend, a new dialogue partner, a new way of engaging my own identity in the multitude of identities. So as Marlene at the very beginning of this conversation said, that these are about people, and we're all people in our own unique ways of bringing identity and inclusion of our own voices. And we're moving to the next session, which is seeing and feeling the impact of equity and inclusion in our diverse communities. As we find ways of circling around learning and figuring out new ways in which we can do these things, it's a frontline perspectives that we have. That we all affect people. The work that we do here is we call it a communitas, of many entry points in. And one of the biggest parts of that many entry pointing is giving voice and space for people to share their story, to be part of the human complex. But we also know there's a future in this, so we have to understand what are the key takeaways to advance our desired futures. There's many ways in which we can see a future, and the most inclusive way is probably, in my mind, the best way. So we're going to have a variety. Three people will have about 3 minutes each to share their story. And we are people of story. Indigenous people are people of story. But as I've come to hear, that we're all people of story. So the first storyteller I'd like to introduce is Laura Pinchbeck. They are an inclusive designer and eco-spatial researcher, where she explores processes, practices, and products to design inclusive environments. She does this through her doctoral studies in human ecology, through her firm serving clients to be more inclusive from engagement to evaluation through collaboration with those dedicated to making Canada inclusive for all. Laura is a third-generation queer woman from Old Strathcona. She and her partner were the first parents to adopt, first adopted parents in America to get their children's birth certificates changed, where it said parent instead of mother and father. Laura has been researching, designing, and advising on congregate residential communities since the early 90s. So I invite Laura to take the stage.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. And right for that beautiful introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for asking me to join you today and to give a little bit of our perspective. I think that I bring two perspectives to this conversation as I look forward to forecasting what Alberta might be doing in terms of supporting people as they're getting older. And one of them is from the lens of the fact that our household lives with a wide variety of different disabilities, and the history that we've gone through in over several decades means that we have particular experiences which mean that we might not willingly be approaching or entering into any organized services or institutions or facilities that others may be crafting together. And I think there's several reasons for that that I would like to share with you. So one of them is that although we do have an incredibly fantastic healthcare system here, the reality is that experiencing medical care can be traumatic for some people. And that can leave a lasting impression in terms of how people choose then to interact with their own health, how they choose to address it, and where they go, and what kind of interactions that they're expecting from others. Oftentimes, the medical profession considers the lived experience as an add-on, or people who have lived experience that want to be able to contribute to conversations around addressing their own health or addressing how decisions are being made. And I think that one of the things that I ask organizations to continually consider is that they may have the best intention to provide person-centered care. And from their lens, they might feel like they're delivering that. But it's always valuable to get the perspective of the person or the groups of people who are the recipients of that, for whom the greatest impact is expounded, to get them to be able to identify and evaluate and provide feedback about the degree to which that care really is person-centered. And that can be done right from the very beginning, but also having much more robust evaluation processes or feedback systems to be able to inform how those decisions are made. The other thing is that, I'm going through my notes, one of the things that we've noticed in our experience interacting with the medical system is that we often get understood. We interact with just one part of our experience, and then we get labeled as such with, this person is this or has this or something like that. And the work I've been doing previously with congregate communities for older adults is I see that that's happening as a proxy way of identifying who people are, rather than remembering that all of us are very complex and robust humans that have many different parts to us, and we don't necessarily see ourselves just as having one label or one role or one hat that we wear. We're not, singular characteristics in some way. Unfortunately, demographics does that in terms of a way for you know, when we're doing program planning or we're doing, trying to understand population health, we want to have that tool of simplifying and reducing who humans are into categories in a way to try to understand the complexity of them. But let's not just stay at that part. Let's remember that humans are complex. We have psychographic memory, things we can consider. And we want to be respected for all parts of who we are. So the other lens, of course, is that we bring the lens of being queer people here in Alberta. So for 30 years, we've been trying to advocate for basic human rights that are been supported for queer folks. And it still doesn't feel like it's a very stable conversation in terms of providing access. And as we get into older years where we don't want to feel like we're still always advocating for it, we want to feel like we can enjoy some years and we know we're safe, I think. We talk about having safety of built environments, but in this case, I'd love to see that we have safety in terms of our cultural environment or our social environment. And so I want to follow up on the statement about nothing about us without us, but I want to add some pieces to that and say that it needs to happen in a way that works for us and that everything is about us. And that's both for people who live with disabilities and people who identify differently. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. That was beautiful. That was really, really, you have a lot to say and a lot to offer, and I want to thank you for that. It was beautiful. Well, next up is Hazelyn Lagme, and she's from the Philippines, where she graduated nursing in 2008. She went on to the United Arab Emirates, where she worked as an RN for 10 years, including a nursing coordinator at Abu Dhabi's first private hospital. Her RN licensure includes the Philippines, United Arab Emirates, United States, and Canada. Hazelyn and her children came to Canada in April of 2023. She'll describe her experience as an international student and what helps her to feel accepted and included. So I want to welcome Hazelyn to the stage.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hazeline, and I'm an international student. So my children and I came to Canada in April 2023. And as an international student, I was filled with fear and anxiety, for I will once again immerse myself in a different culture. I was scared of rejection and not being able to fit in. But all my worries were gone when I finally got to know people around the community. The country has embraced us wholeheartedly and without judgment. So I would say that enrolling at Norquest is one of the best decisions I've ever made. The college provides a safe environment where we all nurture and grow. It provides an environment that makes every single individual feel important and that I matter. I will always be grateful to the country and to my institution for helping me build my self-esteem and instilling the real value of diversity and inclusion. Throughout this time, I indeed grew not only professionally, but also personally, for I have gained a family. The transition from my country and coming to Canada was made easy because of how they accepted me as a person, respected my culture, and where I came from. So Canada and Norquest College has not only opened doors for me, it has opened windows and roofs. So I will always look back to those humble beginnings when a dreamer stepped foot at Canada's land and move forward with confidence, for this nation continues to mold me with solid and strong foundation to embrace diversity and inclusion. So let me end by quoting a famous writer named Robert Allen, when he said that cultural differences should not separate us from each other, but rather cultural diversity brings a collective strength that can benefit all of humanity. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was tight and beautiful. And thank you for coming to this country. Thank you for sharing your gifts with all of us, and the fact that you can practice your way in being and many cultures and many lands, and you bring all that teaching with you. And we're so glad that it's brought to this land. So thank you, Hazel Lynn, for your wonderfulness and your opportunity to share all that you are in this land, and for all the people you care for.
Thank you very much. I am honored. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Brian Gilks. I hope I said that right. Is retired and holds a degree in fine arts as well as a social worker. He became a full-time caregiver and advocate for his mother when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2009. After her passing in 2022, Brian became more involved with the healthcare field. His list of community involvement activities is long and includes co-lead for the development for the French Guide for Dementia-Friendly Community Project in 4 Calgary communities and towns in Okotoks. Founding member of the Caregiving Support Initiative Committee affiliated with the Age Friendly Calgary. A member and advocate of 2 advisory committees of the CBI Health, and a community facilitator that helps create a caregiver-driven and community-based care kiosk at the Audrey Public Library. So I invite Brian to share his beauty.
Thank you, Reverend and Bright, and AAG for this opportunity. Let me start by saying I remain committed to bringing the lived experience of caregivers when addressing healthcare issues. I'm also interested in transformational change and developing leadership skills. My journey has been about developing medical and social networks of care and support, finding ways to resolve conflicting policies and practices, and searching out options that provide added value to a quality of life. And doesn't that sound like a mission statement in the making? The core of my story is simple. I'm interested in building a network of support and a range of appropriate and meaningful choices that lead to empowerment of caregivers. My current focus is to advocate for other caregivers in a way that their quality of life does not have to be diminished. In order to achieve that, I believe we need to move away from a crisis management approach in our communities and act upon preventative options. I do realize that this can be a challenge. I'd like to take a moment to explore these challenges from another lens. It is something I refer to as an advocacy chill. What creates this situation? Often it is complex and involves many moving parts. Sometimes it's difficult to address as it will require a major policy or a cultural shift in our workplaces. Not all caregivers or agency staff have the time, energy, or skills to advocate. Some health professionals, community, and family members become gatekeepers. Sometimes clients and agency staff have fear over losing services or funding. Often it is a result of the voice of individuals or caregivers not being heard or respected. Well, I heard caregivers loud and clear, so began launching into my own version of Rick Mercer's healthcare rants. No, I jest. I began to act upon caregiver challenges and engaging community representatives for their assistance. This resulted in a new and unique project at the Airdrie Public Library that got started in January of this year. An informational kiosk that is caregiver-driven and relies on collaboration of community resources and engagement. The project is not an attempt to replace existing services or programs. Instead, it provides options for caregivers and others to easily access, be it financially or physically. Currently, Caregivers Alberta is taking the lead in this project. Why choose a library setting? These locations are overwhelmingly safe, inclusive, and welcoming. They are places that don't identify people as sick or unwell. They have a workforce that can assist you in sorting out massive amounts of information in a logical and efficient way. They provide a social environment that is non-judgmental. They are a place that offers intergenerational activities. They provide a service that is totally person-centered. Finally, a caregiver kiosk can be replicated virtually in any town, city, or neighborhood where a library exists. And if we look at voice and space, I think the library really does a great job at reflecting that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for your advocacy and putting voice in place in places where it needs to be heard. And I think that is the part of what being inclusive means. Is advocacy is sometimes people get afraid of that word, but standing for and standing with is very much what part of what it means to be a human being. I want to thank you, Brian, for just being wonderful. Thank you. Where have we been? The journey we all need is here, and and especially in the time where we think that inclusivity is at the forefront of people's imagination. I think we also know that potential being inclusivity is also is being threatened. So I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to provide space for someone like me, an Indigenous person who works with poor people, vulnerable people, queer people, old people, like all the places where the margins tend to get forgotten in the body politic. We have a place where a more marginalized older person can feel very, 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 very unsafe and unheard and uncared for. And there's places like all the work that you're doing allows these people to feel safe and advocated for. We have to look forward to something, and the forward is as we work together collaboratively. I think that is the scariest word in some political minds, is when people who are vulnerable start collaborating and they start seeing each other and start hearing each other and be part of an inclusive way of being. Like, again, taking away the fences, even taking away the boxes, then providing a new table, and maybe even changing some of the processes, and maybe even changing some of the outcomes. We are thankful for the opportunity to be a voice for the voiceless sometimes. So I want to thank you all for that. There is a post-forum survey, which I think we all need to be part of. Want to hear from you about your personal commitments and ideas in the post-forum survey. We want to hear about the values this learning has been intended and your intentions to share your resources. And if we stay silent, that is the biggest stop to inclusivity. Giving more space, more opportunities for voice to happen is where we need to continue to work. All the resources, all the slides and the videotapes and presentations will be available on the AAG website in about a month. And I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Daniels for our closing message.
Thank you, Reverend Enright. I can't say enough how important this conversation has been. And I know as someone who my space into working with older adults is through housing, which is a very contested space right now. There's lots of conversation around that. I do think that there is a lot of work that we need to continue to do in each of our individual areas, but as collectives as well, in terms of working to better understand the circumstances of the people we serve, but also the people who work in our organizations, who are the hearts and hands of the organizations. And so I'm at this point, I think I'm committing to how do we continue looking at ways to continue many of the things that I heard today to implementing things. And I do hope that the participants on the line have found those pebbles that can become that stone that starts rolling into bigger things in their own organizations or in their lives. And so I do want to say thank you to everyone for attending. As Reverend Enright shared, there will be, the recording will be on the AAG website, and any questions that have been put in the Q&A will also be answered in the report that then goes up on the website as well. Thank you all for joining us today, and I do look forward to seeing everyone again later this month at the policy discussion. Have a good afternoon.